Hi, I'm Martin Bjerregaard. Welcome to Pine Tribe's video interview. With us today we have Bill Liao, who I'll get back to in just a second, and Philip Trampe, my colleague here at Pine Tribe. So, as we always do, first a small fact about Scandinavia. And this is actually a great day to do this exercise because we just came out again as the world's happiest nation, according to World Happiness Report. Denmark is the happiest country in the world. Again. I think that's worth a celebration.
It is.
And number 2 is Norway, our neighbor country here in Scandinavia. Number 3 is Switzerland. They have so much cheese, chocolate, good things going on. And number 4 is the Netherlands. They have, free marijuana and things like that. And a great work-life balance, I should mention, like we do in Denmark. And then number 5 is Sweden, the home country of my wife. So I kind of enjoy seeing that on the list as well. So that was a small introduction. And Bill, I was in doubt about how to introduce you. I've known you for a couple of years now, and you have been up to and are doing so many things that I think, words that pop into my mind is businessman, investor, philanthropist, author, speaker, and I guess all of them are true. And at the same time, I feel that maybe you could do a more convincing short story about who you are.
I would say that I'm a citizen of Earth.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. The thing that I see more and more is that nationalism is actually a bit childish, and we need to, start thinking more about how much happiness there is on the whole planet as an average, rather than which is the happiest place. So while I admire that Denmark is the happiest, maybe it's a good example. It's not okay for me that there's an unhappiest place on Earth. That's something that I really want to work very hard, and I am working hard to shift so that we have a world that works for all living things.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And actually, I learned about you the first time when I read a book that you've written. And Philip, I know you just read it recently as well, and it's called Stone Soup. Do you mind, sharing with us why you wrote that book and what's the general message in it?
So yeah, the world occurs in language, and particularly the human world occurs in language. So everything that we do, everything that we end up impacting, has its beginning and its end in how we speak about it, how we think internally about it, how we share about it. And that means that language has the power to achieve really anything. And Stone Soup is a folktale about how an impoverished magician, causes a shift in a village just through the use of creative language. And when I look around the world, we need more and more powerful ways of expressing the things that need to happen so that people get behind them. And that's what caused me to write the book.
Yeah, I remember when I visited you in Ireland and you allowed me to spend half a day together with you to be inspired from you. You mentioned this term of this word, a sound bite, and gave me a few examples of that. And I think that was one thing that I definitely brought home with me. The idea of if you make the right phrase, that can travel faster than the speed of light, probably, or almost as fast.
Or it's at the speed of light as soon as it's on the radio.
Yeah. And remember one example you gave, and that is because you're pretty big on forestation and taking initiative to an NGO called WeForest, where you just planted over 5 million trees. Congratulations!
Thank you.
I saw your YouTube, your TED talk around this topic, I think, and you have this phrase of saying, "Do you want a tree with that?" Isn't that right?
Do you want a tree? Do you want trees with that? Or our best one so far is buy 2 get 1 tree. And in fact, there are several consumer brands that you will see very shortly announcing their coming onto that buy two get one tree campaign. And the thing to know about that is that the language works really powerfully to assist the companies to actually make a profit while they're doing good. Because when they buy two and get one tree, they halve their customer acquisition cost and they tax deduct the bonus item. So that means it's profitable day one. And the money goes very directly to the people planting the trees, which are village women around the equator who plant them by hand and are paid to look after them and to plant them, but also are trained to create food forests that actually will crop year in, year out and provide them with more value than the tree would have as timber or as charcoal. So all the way down the chain, value is created. And yet, all of that occurs in language.
Yeah, and some hard work probably.
Yeah.
Lots of hard work. But hard work is inspired by the language you believe in.
Plus, it's the language that kickstarted the whole thing to go, and then you start the win-win-win-win effect.
Yeah, and look at what you just said. Win, 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 win.
Yeah.
Each win is in language first and last. Right? When you have a win, if you have a win by yourself alone and you can't tell anyone about it, it just doesn't feel as good.
No.
I see what you're saying. Because you can't share your victory, so who's celebrating? Just yourself.
Exactly. It seems awfully self-serving to celebrate it by yourself.
How do you relate to sports then? Because then there's a winner and a loser. Is that a good thing, or is it like something we need to move beyond, or or is that just a different area of life?
Well, I think there's a competitive dynamic in all humans. I think it's kind of hardwired into the genes. At the same time, our DNA is also a form of language, and it's digital. So, where we could take this, who knows? What I can say is that I think that if you ask any competitor at the top of their game, like if you go to the Olympics and you look at the top 10, I don't think any of the top 10 think of themselves as losers at any point during the games. And yes, 3 of them come home with medals, but I would be very surprised to see, number 8 saying, "Oh, I'm a loser."
And you would also say maybe in a sports scenario, the person who, let's say, on top with the gold, their win is at other people's loss. So that's how they're comparing it. They may celebrate their win with their supporters or in the Olympics, their country, but it was at somebody else's loss versus when we're talking about Bill's win-win-win scenario, nobody's losing out.
Yeah, I mean, both. It's like you can have winners without losers, and that's the key. But in sport, I don't think that even the losers consider themselves losers, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I think it's much better that we compete with sport than we compete with war.
Definitely, yeah.
That's a way to work out the anger right there.
Exactly.
Leave it on the field. Leave it on the field.
Yeah, I think soccer could probably do with more scoring so that the anger is released faster, so that that it is left on the field.
Yeah. And why did it become forestation that has turned into your big passion for the world, alongside other passions, of course? How did you came up with the idea? Did anything or anyone trigger that?
Yeah, I mean, actually, it was my daughter who most triggered that, because when we were sitting together, we homeschool our kids, and years ago when we were sitting together looking at the data on climate change, she looked up at me and said, "Daddy, you broke the planet, you better fix it." And the more data I looked at climate, I realized that we have a really big problem. And one of the issues with language is that you can be always negative, and almost all of the literature, all of the promotion, all of the language around climate was negative. And I realized that actually, if you're going to have an impact, you've got to have some positive messages. You've got to give people some hope. And so, my new book, Forest, the tagline is Reasons to be Hopeful. And the reason that trees are so important is because they have this multi-dimensional impact. They're a very holistic approach to doing something about climate change. They're not the only solution, but boy, do they do a lot. So, for instance, when you plant a tree, you sequester, if you rehabilitate degraded land, which has got no carbon in it because all the life is dead, and you reforest that, you store a lot of carbon in the soil, you store a lot of carbon in the tree, and you bring carbon into the food chain again. And so, like every piece of fruit you eat and you put the fertilizer back in the soil, you're sequestering more and more carbon. So actually, each tree is about a ton of CO2 that you actually put back when you do a holistic approach. But then the trees make clouds. They have little bacteria on their leaves that fly up into the atmosphere and seed clouds. And clouds reflect sunlight. So if you can increase cloud cover by 1 to 2% around the equator, you can actually really make a huge impact on global warming, because there's many, 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 many more times water in the atmosphere than CO2. Water is measured in whole percentage points. CO2 is measured in parts per million. So if you can change the water cycle, you can have a much bigger, quicker effect. And then trees also offer economic benefit all the way up and down the line, as we just spoke about. It's a win all the way. So really, that's why, because they're such a powerful tool, reforesting has become a big part. It's in fact my only tool in the environmental side of things. That positive message, the win-win-win, and actually trees making clouds.
Okay, so your daughter put you up to the challenge of fixing the planet, and you thought about it in an analytic way. What is the way I can have most impact? And
So
came up with trees.
Yeah, well, my daughter put me up to the challenge, but actually I didn't think about it in an analytical way. I went out to my network and I looked for a couple of years for a solution. And everybody was telling me the negative messages, and those result in paralysis. And I was looking for, well, what could you do tomorrow that would actually make a difference? And it turns out that planting a tree is the most powerful thing that I could find. If there's something more powerful that I could find, I'd do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's proven very scalable now with the 5 million trees planted and a strong organization.
Yeah, very scalable and very quick. Much quicker than people think. You can start, producing actually a good permaculture system within months of starting, and the trees within years. And the other thing is, I get very irritated when people say, oh, look, the environment, we must teach our kids how to look after the environment. And I think that's actually, my daughter had it right. I mean, our generation broke the planet. We should fix it while we still can. We've made the money. We're the richest generation of humans on the planet. Even the poorest are the richest, if you see what I mean, than humans have ever been. We should really take that last 40 years of progress and say, right, now time to spend that on fixing what we broke. Yeah. And not leave it for the kids to fix it for them. That's good parenting,
Yeah. So what does she think about it now, your daughter? How old is she?
She's 14 now.
14. What does she think about Daddy's project now?
She's pretty proud. Yeah. I mean, it's like, like it's on the way, but she's still like cracking the whip, got work.
That's good.
There's another movement that you initiated called Coderdojo. Coderdojo. Do you mind sharing a bit about that?
Sure. Well, to have a world that works for everyone, the first thing you need is a world that's still livable. So that's the environment side. But then you also need people to be enlightened. And I believe that language is the pathway to enlightenment. And I believe that exposure to all sorts of languages is really powerful. And computer languages are probably the most powerful languages in many areas. And yet, when I started with James Welton, my co-founder, when we started together 3 years ago, we couldn't find any programming courses for primary school kids anywhere. No schools were doing it.
It only started at a later age? Or?
Yeah, they only started at college level usually,
Really?
even secondary school. And if you're going to learn a language, you are so much better learning it young. And you have to understand, great programming, great code is poetry, right? The best coders are poets who play well with others. And why are they poets? Because they have creativity and economy of expression. And that's the definition of poetry: more meaning in fewer words, fewer instructions. And the best code, you can see it runs fast, it's smooth, and it does lots of stuff with very little effort. That's fantastic code. Now, to get that good, you need to start 6, 7, 8 years old. And you need to start in a social way, and we've proven that. If you look around the world for 800 years, karate and kendo have been taught in dojos. Experientially, collaborative learning, and where there's a focus on passing on what you learn. And we looked at that and we realized that nobody was doing that with anything but martial arts. And yet here is a system that predates the Western education system by 400 years and is still operating in every country. How can that be? Why don't we leverage that? So we turned it into Coderdojo. We now have 360 plus dojos in 39 countries. Each dojo is around 100 kids. So we've got a lot of kids going, and we're growing all the time. We just opened up in partnership with the US State Department Coderdojo in Nigeria and Coderdojo Tanzania. And with their Lions in Africa initiative, we're actually going to be rolling them out Pan-Africa and also in the future Pan-Asia. Well, we already have Coderdojos in most European countries and in 28 US states. There's even Coderdojo in Denmark.
It's good to know. And is it only for kids, or can we all join in on this?
Coderdojo is for kids. If you want to go to a Coderdojo as an adult, you need to be accompanied by a minor.
Okay, I'll see if I can get a hold of one. Because I know I have just to go in and learn some coding.
Yeah, that could all go horribly wrong if you.
No. Maybe I'll force my little brother to go into a dojo and then pass on the information to me dojo style. I think that might be a way to.
You could accompany him as a parent of record, no problem.
There we go. That's the way to do it.
And it's a fantastic career move for him, because it doesn't matter what career you choose. Being able to code will improve your chances of success. Because there is no field of human endeavor where novel software cannot make a difference or is not already a dependency. And yet we're out of programmers. The highest dropout levels in university and college courses are in computer science. Why? Because it's hard. And unless you've been exposed young, it's really hard.
Can anyone learn it, Bill? Because I'm if I remember correctly, you used to be a programmer yourself, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm still a programmer, but I'm not doing it for all the time, so I'm not very good anymore. But I could, if I had to, I could just go back to programming and get good again. Because once you've got that skill, you can always reactivate it. But if you've never done it before, it's very hard. It's not impossible, but it's like learning a new language when you haven't learned another language before. It's hard to get really good. I mean, it's possible, but it's very hard to write poetry in anything but your mother tongue.
But as you said, if you've learned it before, you can pick it back up if you re-immerse yourself in the culture. Yeah.
Exactly.
And Bill, I remember you told me that I don't know if it's still the case, but in the beginning, you didn't even have a bank account in this organization, Coderdojo. Is that still the case with so many locations, or have you had to abandon that?
No. I mean, we have a couple of foundations that support us. Sean O'Sullivan Foundation and Hello World Foundation. But there is no central Coderdojo bank account. All of this is self-organizing. People do it because they love it and because they see the impact that it has for the kids. The spaces are donated mostly by offices. So, you have, like most offices have a canteen or a boardroom they're not using. on a Saturday or a Sunday or after hours. And that is where the Coderdojos happen. And here's the thing. Kids love going in to see where mum or dad works. They love spending time in office environments. They don't want to spend more time at school. But when you say, hey, come into this office and come into this boardroom, you know, they love it. And I'll give you an example. In Oxford, there's this wonderful young girl called Taria. She is 11 years old. She is a hardcore Python developer. And she was a young Rewired State champion. And she contacted us and said, I want to start a Coderdojo. And she sent an email. She asked me, well, where could I have it? I said, well, what businesses are around? She said, well, down the street from us is Natural Motion Games, who make my favorite game, Clumsy Ninja. And I did a quick LinkedIn search, and I found Torsten Riehl, the CEO, on LinkedIn, and I got his email address. I gave it to Taria. She wrote this wonderful email. I mean, 11 years old, and she writes this impassioned email about how she wants to have all the kids that she knows learning to code. Would they give their studio space for a few hours a week? And of course, he said yes. I mean, what could he say? But seriously, he said yes with much enthusiasm. And so on the 29th of this month, the first Coderdojo championed by an 11-year-old is going to be running for free in Oxford. And all of that cost nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you told me this as an example that you don't always need to have money to have a big impact. Often you can have a huge impact without even, spending anything on it.
Well, think about the impact that this 11-year-old girl is having now in her life, right? She's going to be leading the sessions, spreading her knowledge of Python programming to a whole raft of kids in Oxford. And all it took was a few well-asked questions and some passion.
So what's your answer to the question of if it's money that makes the world go around, as a lot of people seem to think?
I think that, money is a tool. And it has benefits and it has hazards. I don't understand why you would have $62 billion in a personal fortune. I don't understand why you'd have $1 billion in a personal fortune. But I also understand that it sucks to be poor. So there's a balance point that people have to work out where how much is of worth do they need to live comfortably enough so that they are taking care of their own needs, that they can then, on that comfortable platform, do something really amazing. Because I think we're all after impact, right? I'm never happier than when something goes right. And it has an impact. I was actually speaking to some people today, and that work at a wonderful charity where I am a trustee called the Nominet Trust, which invests in the UK in enhancing technology for social enterprise. And in the discussion, it came up that it's not just enough to be purposeful. It's got to be meaningful and purposeful. But it's also not just enough to be meaningful. I see a lot of people who say, oh, it's got so much meaning what we're doing, but they're actually not doing anything. Their impact is zero, but it's very meaningful and very good, right?
Yeah. The idea of doing something is meaningful, but they don't execute well on it.
Exactly. Yeah. And at the same time, I see a lot of people who are very purposeful, but without any meaning. So they're doing their job. And one of the women I was talking to, she was an accountant for a multinational previously, and she had plenty of purpose every day, and no meaning in her life whatsoever, right? And so switching to working in the charitable sector, she has the purpose of bringing her excellence in accounting to it, and there's a lot of meaning in what she does.
Bill, in addition to having a big impact, you're also very good at making money. You have been a critical part of 7 IPOs, and you now partner in a huge investment fund. One approach could also be to use your skills in business to make as much money as possible and then give it away for charity. Or where do you see that you are having the most impact when you're doing business and giving the money kind of back to charity, or if you are doing something like WeForest or Coderdojo, or do you have any ideas around that?
I do. I think that you've got to look at charity in a very specific way. You know, for a long time, charity was just about handouts, all right? And they don't work. You know, okay, if somebody gets hit by a car, yes, you need to help them. But unless they're in that kind of critical need, they don't need help. In fact, if you give someone who doesn't need help a handout, you take away their self-esteem. You actually make them less capable. You know, I've been in Africa where farmers lost their businesses because food aid was so regularly dumped there they couldn't sell their own corn. You know, that's a disaster. That handout model can be really toxic. So then a lot of people sort of thought, well, we do a hand-up model, you know, where we help people to help themselves. Well, here's the problem with that. It can work to some degree, but again, there's an arrogance there. There's like you're implying that somebody needs help, that they're somehow helpless. And that doesn't have them think for themselves. The only thing that I've seen that actually works is a handshake model. And that's actually capitalism, actually. You know, it's where you do a deal with them. So like with WeForest, we're doing a deal with the women planting the trees. And they are, you know, absolutely contracted to do the job. And they're grateful for that. They're being paid to do something, and they're building their own asset because of that. Mm-hmm. That's actually a mutually beneficial relationship. We win, they win. Win-win. Coderdojo, there is a contract. It's not a written contract, but it's an implied contract with the kids and the next generation of kids. At my original Coderdojo, where it's 3 years old now, no money's changed hands, but all the mentors now are under the age of 14. And if you go to coderdojo.org, you'll actually see in one of the videos 2 of the mentors there who are actually just talking to camera, and the confidence they have, you can see them inspiring the next generation of kids. That's a contract. That's a win-win. Mm-hmm. So when I look at people who go and make tons and tons and tons of money, and then they give it all away, I worry that they're not actually doing something sustainable. I think that if you create systems that sustain and perpetuate themselves, like businesses, that they transcend the individual ego. I'm sure Coderdojo and WeForest are going to keep going, regardless of what happens to me. And that's a great thing, because that's an ongoing impact towards a successful future for us all. And I wish more people would think that way. You know, I don't mind that somebody makes themselves wealthy, but I think that there's a point where the wealth becomes kind of obscene, and it's probably too hard to even give it away effectively. Maybe stop before that and actually look at how can you make wealth that self-perpetuates.
Yeah.
If I could just ask you, the story that you told earlier with the food aid coming in, I forget which country it was in Africa, but sorry, where? Uganda?
Uganda, yeah.
Yeah, that really hit a chord with me, and I feel that you're right. These handouts, they don't do much. I mean, sure, it'll help you in the short run, but it can also hurt you in the long run. But a lot of these things are government funded, and you know, other big organizations like that. How can you go into a government system and say, with your shaking hands model, which is essentially capitalism, and impose it in on governments? Is there a way to do that?
I think it's very hard to impose anything on anyone. And the way to do it is through conversations like this being public. Mm-hmm. Because the more people get these simple messages, the more it becomes intolerable for a state to sponsor, you know, the kinds of programs that do long-term harm. You know, there are countries in the world that have famine year after year, more and more aid year after year, and a population increase year after year. Mm-hmm. Something is wrong. But until the general public understand that just giving is actually potentially very harmful, nothing will change. Once it's seen, it can't be unseen.
Valid point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think our half hour is up. I for one would enjoy talking a lot more about this topic, and hopefully
I love talking with you guys.
hopefully we get an occasion at a later time. I'll just say thanks so much, Bill. It was really really insightful. I already look forward to watching the tape again because there's so many great pieces of information and food for thought. So thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
And have a lovely day, everyone.
I have one last thing to say.
Yes.
Go and start a Coderdojo or plant a tree today.
Absolutely. We'll put some links under the interview also for your amazing organizations, Bill.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thanks for listening.